We are live. It's the Indie Spotlight No Name Cinema Society, our 30th one, and we're 2 minutes late. I apologize, but we're here now, and you can all breathe a sigh of relief. I'm Jonathan Betzler. I'm one of your hosts, and as you know, it's Indie Spotlight, and in 2016, I don't know I'm doing all those gestures with my hands, but I am. In 2016, we've been discussing indies from 5 years ago, 2011, and since we're behind, we'll try and catch up now. I turned the fan off because I couldn't hear these guys as much, so I'm sweating a lot. So we'll see. We'll do a sweatometer as the broadcast goes on. And let's introduce my co-host here, who's up with me now. I'm going to start with Drunk Davey. Drunk Davey, it's Indie Spotlight time.
All right, let's do it.
And Davey, you're in Vegas, aren't you?
I am. It's hot.
Are you having a good time?
Oh, you bet.
And that's pretty much all you're going to get out of him over the course of the evening, ladies and gentlemen. My other co-host in Brooklyn, New York, Jay the Money.
Hello, people. Hello, people.
I added an article in the middle of your name, Jay the Money.
Jay the Money. I mean, that works for me. It makes me even more money.
It's true. You are. That's right. Show me the money. They show him that gentleman right there.
Yeah.
Indies, we have a tradition. Every 10 shows, we're celebrating our 30th episode, as you know, 30th night that we're doing this. And every 10 shows, we do a little look back at our previous Indie Spotlight. So in our 20th show, we did 11 through 20. So now it's time for us to do 21 through 30. These are last 10 Indie Spotlights that we've done, including tonight's episode. And as you can see, you know, for episodes 21 and 22, we're still apart. We still did those in 2015, so we did films from 2010, and then when the calendar shifted, we started doing our 2011 films. And all these films are films that I've recommended, starting and going towards my favorite of 2011 and on the way down. So looking at this list for me, guys, Shame still stands out for me as my favorite. Do you guys have a favorite on this list? Crickets.
I'm bringing it in. I gotta look in here. You know what?
You made the list.
I'm gonna go with a relatively recent addition, Melancholia. I think is
that doesn't surprise me
on this list.
Now, and Davey Joe, you've surprisingly liked almost all the indies that we've had recently.
Yeah, no, I'm usually the easiest to please of the three of us. For some reason I can't read 21. What is it?
It's pounds.
Okay. You know, I think it's either going to be Melancholia or Shame.
So you're right in between us, playing it safe. All right, so now that we've done that tradition, let me just show you guys where we are in the evening. We got our second show. We just finished our Free State of Jones broadcast. We did about 26 minutes on it. It was outstanding. No, I'm not. I don't know. It was interesting. Take a look at that now. Obviously, it's 8:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. We're doing Circumstance. In about 30 minutes, we got a classic feature of The Grapes of Wrath, and then our sound off, our freeform section, where Davey's got a diatribe. I've got my top 5 Matthew McConaughey films, and what else is happening? Something interesting. I've got a second run of a film that Davey recommended in one of his little diatribes. So, anyway, let us. What is this? What have I got up here? Oh yeah, trivia. It's like, what's the next photo? So the trivia for the evening on the podcast. I made the joke that it was a lesbian, an Arabic lesbian film, which is true. But it's obviously much more than that. And on Facebook, we said that the director, Maryam Keshavarz, was actually banned in her home country, as were some members of the cast. The film, of course, is banned in Iran. Maryam Keshavarz now lives in Los Angeles, but she was born in Iran and schooled there a little bit, but she is no longer allowed because of this movie. So, a lot of the filmmakers and everybody involved, some big stakes in order to make this movie happen, and so we're going to try and figure out whether or not it was worth it. You guys ready to talk about Circumstance?
Hell yes.
Yeah.
You guys got to get more pumped than that. Come on, show me you're excited. J Money, show the money.
What? Yes, the money.
What? What? Yeah. What?
What?
Who? Anyway, all right. So circumstance. Atafe and Shireen here are schoolmates, and they're best friends, whose relationship starts to escalate to a sexual level just as Atafe's brother Maron returns home. Maron was once a musical prodigy. He got addicted to drugs, and as part of his rehab, he's taking some extreme measures to get back on course. So that is the summary of Circumstance. How was that summary for you guys?
Pretty good.
I like
Not
it.
as good as the other one, huh? You have some issues.
Well, I think the other one was a little more flowery, but that's okay.
Okay, all right, fair enough. All right, so I'm the one that recommended Circumstance. Now, as I previously stated, my recommendations have been going down in descending order, like with Shane on the way down. So the next few recommendations, including last week and this week, they're a little more mixed. I have some quibbles. I think the story is great here. I think there's some really great performances, including one extremely memorable one, and I'll get to that later. I think the use of music is terrific. I think it's actually a pretty sexy film. And I also think that, well, like I said, I've got some quibbles that I'll address later. So let's do opening thoughts, and let's start with Davy Joe.
I liked the movie a lot. It was really interesting.
Okay, J Money.
I think that it sounds like I probably liked it less than you guys, although I liked it. But ultimately, I think I respect it more than the fact that I liked it. I think this is an important movie, and I recognize that.
All right, so I guess let's unpack that later, because it sounds like it'll be part of the quibble thing. Do you at least agree that the story is strong?
I don't disagree with this. Well, I guess I don't find it incredibly unique. I mean, I think that the setting is what makes it unique, but otherwise, I don't feel like there was anything necessarily that compelling about the story in and of itself.
Right. No, I mean, the setting almost raises the stakes too. I mean, I think it's a really interesting look inside Iran, particularly the sort of liberal underground aspect of Iran that we don't get to see too much of. Now, I'm very careful to say that it's not a great screenplay, because that really leads into some of the quibbles I have, but I definitely was engaged the whole time, and I definitely, I admittedly cared about these characters a lot. So, does that sound reasonable to you, J Money?
Yeah, well, I think that gets into the respect portion of what I was saying before. Yeah,
I kind of thought you would. I mean, like, coming from a liberal background, like, you think it's important, but I mean, like, I do think that part of the joy, if you will, or the enjoyment of seeing this movie is getting to see this aspect of Iran, and also getting to see, like, we sort of know it, but it's interesting to see how not that different they are as people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels worlds apart. It feels cultures apart.
Absolutely. One of the most important aspects of this film is the way that it actually approaches normal life in this kind of setting, where we don't ever get a chance to spy that. I mean, I think it's important, JB, just to note that this wasn't actually filmed in Iran. It was filmed in Lebanon.
In Lebanon.
In Beirut.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that there was enough of a culture there, or a texture to the culture there, that it translates very well. And I do love the representation, and the fact that also this movie brings a lot of style to how it represents the area. I really appreciate that. So. Yeah,
no, and I don't think I said it was made Iran. I think I said Iran set. I said American-made Iran set, and it was set in Iran. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Davey, do you have anything on the story element before I move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the setting is half, maybe more than half the story. I mean, you're right. It raises the stakes tremendously. So it's definitely what adds a lot of suspense to the film.
Now, do you guys know what I mean when I said there's one performance that stands out above the others? Do you guys have a guess?
I mean, for me, it's Mayron, but I don't know what you're gonna say.
I'm gonna say it's one of the female leads, but I really don't know.
David Joe got it. This is Reza Sixo Safai, and we actually back in we talked about, he came up before because we actually talked about a film he was in called A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night that we talked about in Spotlight on episode 9 on. Now, for Circumstance, though, a lot of my fellow production company people, we all saw it together, and we actually gave him a Myriad Arts Award nomination. That's how much we all liked his performance. We thought he really stands out. I think it's the most complex role in the film, and he kicks the crap out of it in a good way. That's a plus, J Money. In case sometimes my sports analogies he doesn't understand. I think
it's a rat pack.
His glare burns a hole in the screen. Like it burns emotions into your soul as you're watching. I think even though he's not the most likable character, you feel his fear, his guilt, his rage, his desires. The way his judgment of others is really a judgment of himself underneath. I think, and all of it's like under the surface. Like I think it's really some outstanding work, and is worth watching all alone. And all these folks live nearby in Los Angeles. Like we all have a lot of mutual Facebook friends. So so it's interesting how like our circles are sort of crossing with a lot of people involved in this film. Now it sounds like Davy Joe liked this performance. Where are you, J Money?
I honestly didn't like his performance, and it's interesting that we have such different interpretations of it. I mean, I see the point you're trying to make, and I'll buy that. I'll buy what you're saying. Ultimately, for me, while watching it, it felt very wooden. It felt very flat to me.
That's interesting interpretation, because I mean, like I had like the complete opposite. David Joe, back me up.
Yeah, I mean, look, this guy goes from being just a menacing, scary character to pathetic in an instant, and he pulls it off in a way, and that's hard to do without it coming off as just utterly laughable, and it worked. It worked really well.
Where was he ever not a menacing character? Was he pretty much not just a menacing character from the get-go?
Well,
I think he's very vulnerable when he starts, and I think once he gets married, I think his pain comes out again. I think that's what Dave Joe's referring to.
At the end he breaks down again. So he starts off as this kind of pathetic guy who's got a drug problem, and then he turns into an absolute monster, and then in the blink of an eye he's just a weepy sad guy again, and it worked. I mean, it really worked.
It's a rare, astute Davy Joe assessment of a performance. That's really good. But I mean, like, yeah, I that's true. And, I'm a less is more kind of guy. You know what I mean? Like, I think that if you watch the other 29 episodes, you'll see a lot of that when I'm evaluating these performances. And I mean, like, I'm extrapolating a lot, but I mean, I think it's there. Like, and I feel like I know this character so much better because of the performance. I mean, because the script itself, and we'll get to this quibbles, is not as clear on some things. It's kind of vague on some of his stuff. That I think this is the kind of thing that we talked about how Matthew McConaughey wasn't able to help the script in Free State of Jones. I think here, Reza 60 Safai is.
I think less is more is a phrase that's bandied about a lot without necessarily there being an understanding of what it might mean. Less is more doesn't necessarily mean a literal lack of something. It just means an understanding of what happens between spaces. And I think for my
I think for me it means like I feel that this on film a subtle gesture can resonate so much louder than bigger histrionics.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that, but I didn't really. I mean, I understand that this character was very subtle, and I understand that there was a lot of subtle things happening with the character. To me, ultimately, the character felt like it was almost, and maybe this was intentional. It felt kind of like disassociated from reality in a lot of ways. It felt like he was kind of an empty shell, and you saw him being sort of terraformed by the culture ministry, and then become more of an evil character. But ultimately, I don't know if it's because I just didn't connect with the character, because obviously I'm not an evil, horrible person, or if it's just that I couldn't get past the surface sheen of his menace. But to me, I'm not necessarily reading the bigger picture.
Right, and we're running out of time quickly. I guess we've spent a lot of time on this, but in terms of the girls, I was a little split on them. I liked Adabe a lot, played by Nicole Bouchari. In fact, I even recommended her for this short that I'm working on now.
Cool. Very cool.
I don't know if that will actually happen, but I think she makes smart, confident choices. I actually think, as far as Sarah Kazemi's concerned, I feel like the director kind of cut around her. I kind of felt like, you know, she was not as effective, and I feel like they were kind of minimizing what she had to do, and you know, and she had good characterization and the good direction prevented her from being a drawback. But I really felt like when things needed to get emotional, like I almost felt like they were hiding her.
Yeah, that's funny. I feel the exact same way about that one, at least. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna skip the music thing. We got like 2 minutes left here in the alarm. So let's get to quibbles. Do you want to start the quibbles? What are you shaking your head for? You want to be done on time, don't you?
No. Yeah, no. It's just too bad that went so quick. But no, you start with the quibbles because I don't think I have really.
Well, we started late. So no, I might need you to start with the quibbles because I need to pull up some photos. But all right, I'm ready. I can do it now.
Okay.
So all right. So I mean, I think mainly it's screen execution issues. They're mostly minor issues. One is an issue of clarity. I mean, like on the bright side, I think the screenplay really trusts its audience. We talk about that from time to time. But I mean, like this is a rare example where I'm like, do they trust us too much? There's some really vague concepts that I think we get, that I understood, but I think that are so vague and under the surface that like only the most detailed viewers are going to get the details of Mehran's backstory, Mehran's role with the authorities, the fact that the father was educated in America, the fate of their friend Hossein, like all those things were sort of like buried under the surface and not really addressed in a typical way, which you could argue is strong, but I mean, like I almost wondered if they went too far. What do you guys think about that?
Well, you know, it's funny because in a lot of ways, I respect the fact that we didn't necessarily dive so deep into all those details like you're discussing, because then to me it would have felt, I think, maybe too intentional in a way, which would have made it seem much more allegorical. Would have made it seem a little bit more too much about its you know, I don't want to say propaganda, but like it would have made it feel like it was so much more about just the bigger idea here as opposed to the story. So I certainly see what you're saying. But in a sense, I also like the fact that it did trust us to kind of already know certain.
I mean, like, I normally do too, but I mean, like, I felt like maybe just a teeny bit more. Like, if they gave us 10%, I could have used 15 type thing. You know what I mean? Like, I just felt like it was really borderline.
Yeah.
Davy Joe, did you have any trouble with anything narratively in terms of those clarity issues?
No, I thought I picked up on all that, and you know. They did get kind of a lot in there without going into a lot of exposition, so I think that kind of speaks to the strength of the screenplay.
Okay, so I mean, I guess I'm alone on this because I mean, it was extremely subtle, more subtle than I'm used to seeing, and I like it. So we're almost out of time here, but I wondered like from a, you know, like if I'm reading that script, you know, and evaluating it, I might give a note like, hey, just a little something more about this. I think this is an important detail. Like, just give me something a little more. So that I kept thinking that on a number of occasions. The other issue is fantasy versus reality with this film, and I think I love blurring those lines. Like I do it in my work all the time. I think it's very cinematic, but it bothered me in this movie for some reason, and here are the reasons I came up with. One, I think it was probably unnecessary. I mean, I don't think there was any ever doubt the feelings that the girls had for each other, and I don't think there was any doubt about what they wanted, their goals and the stakes. So I don't know what the fantasy sequences really added. They were intercut at strange points in the narrative too. Like that was the other thing I think it bothered me. I think the opening was a weird thing to open with, and it seemed to interrupt the flow momentum. And it's not really done enough. I mean, like I felt like you know, like if you're gonna do it, you got to do it more. Like it was just sort of sprinkled in a way that it didn't necessarily feel like a part of the movie, and whenever it came up, it felt almost like the 1945 thing that from Free State of Jones. It almost felt like interrupting with the flow. Davy Joe, anything?
No, well, you know, it did interrupt the flow. But again, I kind of enjoy that kind of thing, and so I definitely it kind of speaks to style. It's definitely a flourish, and it could be something that I think you could argue kind of takes you out of the movie or is distracting.
Davy Joe hates flow. That's what we've learned tonight. J Money, do you disagree with me?
No, I don't entirely disagree with you. I think there are certain points you made that I might quibble with. But like overall, I would say the intention was really just to reinforce the idea that these girls had this very private sort of inner life that was not necessarily, they could not at all exhibit around them. And I talked a lot about how they wanted to escape in a lot of ways. I think it was sort of this ultimate fantasy of saying, here we go, this is how we get out. This is our exit strategy in a certain way. And
that was already clear to me. Like
it was clear that they wanted to have a relationship in a way that would be open and accepted, but it wasn't. I think that seeing this personal sort of fantasy that they would share was a little more interesting than just knowing that they wanted to be with each other. I think that there was a quality to that was very sleek and in complete juxtaposition with their actual life that I kind of liked. So, but I do think that maybe it was maybe a little bit too much. I do feel like it did slip in awkwardly at certain places. I actually kind of liked the fact that they started with that in the beginning scene because it was such a weird counterpoint to everything that happened later on. But otherwise, I see what you're saying.
And my final quibble is I felt like there were a ton of shots, and this is a common first-timer kind of mistake. There were a ton of shots that were very stagey, that didn't feel naturally constructed. This is one example. I mean, like, it's not. I mean, like, when they're lying next to each other, it's one thing, but when they're lying on opposite ends and just like happen to land in this sort of way, like sort of staged for the camera in an awkward kind of way. And also, there's this other moment when they're standing out and looking out on quote-unquote Tehran, really Beirut, when they're talking about the land he bought, and the land's like behind them, you know what I mean? And they're like looking out on the city as if it was very awkward the way that it was staged, and like for a cool shot in a very unnatural way. There, you know, the wedding scene is another example of that. So that was my final quibble. All small stuff, to be sure. Obviously, I recommended this movie, but. What were the quibbles that you have, J Money? We don't have a lot of time, but that I didn't get to.
Yeah, I don't know if I really have necessarily quibbles with this movie. I mean, I think the reason that I think it's good and not necessarily great is because I think that, you know, I think that it was really more about the bigger message than anything else, and I guess I feel like there could have been more to it. There could have been more depth to certain things and characters. They could have explored a shorter time period. They could have emphasized one point. But this movie was trying to accomplish a lot, and it exists for a very specific reason, and that reason is to exist. I mean, it's important that it actually does exist as this artifact and as this sort of leftover that can be reviewed by, you know, society, different societies at least. Just the fact that it is something that's really important. I think that's the main takeaway for me.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm a big fan of the film. Me, as is Davey Joe. And I guess J Money's somewhere in the, you know, like mediocre style, if you.
No, you know, for me it's like I would say it's a 6.5 or 7 out of 10.
Okay, very good. I'm about an 8 maybe. All right, cool. That's Circumstance. That's our indie spotlight. We got to move on now. We're still running a little bit late, so we'll probably be a little bit late to start The Grapes of Wrath, which is our next film. We're going to talk about it. Our classic is up next, coming up shortly. Our next indie is. Your little tidbit for the next indie is there's an actor who played a murderer in a film that we talked about last April, and he went on, and he directed a film in 2011. That's our indie for next time. So that's your tidbit. So I hope that you'll see more tidbits on Facebook, and so make sure you like our page. All right, indie spotlight's over. Classics up next. We'll see you guys shortly.